Hello and welcome back to a new video in which I have 3 weeks to make some clothes from secondhand fabrics to sell at my first craft market in Italy. So let me give you a little bit of context. At the end of September, we went back to Italy to buy a ruin we fell in love with over the summer. It's located in this beautiful natural park with these huge sandstone rocks that just look incredible. So we spent a few days exploring the park and the local area. And that's when we met Emma, a friend of my friend Isabella, who organizes a lot of different events in her family's beautifully restored farmhouse. When she heard that I made clothes, she asked me if I wanted to take part in the next edition of their craft market, which would take place at the end of October. I didn't have anything ready with me because we had just arrived in Italy, but I thought if I find some nice secondhand fabrics, maybe I can try and work on a few pieces before the end of the month. So I went on Vinted looking for some nice blankets to make some jackets and sweaters, and I found 3 that I liked, so I ordered them and just hoped for the best. I was lucky we were staying at Isabella's grandma's house, where she has a sewing machine and all the sewing supplies I needed to get started. While I was waiting for the blankets to arrive, I decided to try and make something with this bedsheet that used to belong to Isabella's dad. I had been seeing some cool asymmetrical ruffle dresses on Pinterest, so I decided to try that to kind of balance the geometrical pattern of the bedsheet with some nice flowy gathers. I started by drafting and cutting a bodice piece, and when I liked the shape of it, I went ahead and cut a matching skirt panel that would replicate the geometrical cut of the bodice. Now, I got a bit confused about the next part, but it's literally like sewing any right angle seam. So you start by sewing the vertical seam at the center, leaving 1 centimeter seam allowance at the bottom and the top, and then you snip into the corner of that right angle so that you can rotate the fabric on both sides to sew the horizontal seams. But in my case, I just had to gather the skirt first. So I did by sewing 2 parallel rows of gathering stitches done on the loosest tension and the longest stitch length, so that I could then pull on the loose threads to gather the fabric, and then pin it to the bodice panels before sewing and then removing the gathering stitches. I then pinned the sides and the straps to try the dress on and to make any changes I needed. For example, I added some side darts to prevent gaping at the underarm, which I honestly should have done from the start but just forgot. Next, it was time to add some pockets. And then it was time to bring it all together by finishing the side seams and adding a facing to finish all the raw edges, and then finally to hem the dress. In the meantime, my Vinted blankets had arrived at the local post office, so I went to pick them up. They're so pretty! And I'm so excited to use them. I found some thread that matches, actually both of them, so that's great. And then I can just use the binding that's already on there, unpick it, and then use it again. So the design I worked on yesterday is, I mean, you can't really see much, but that's this. Mm-hmm. You know I love big sleeves. Mm-hmm. It starts here, puffy, gathered. I want to do quite a high sort of V-neck, just angling a little bit. And then for the buttons, I'm thinking I'm going to do like little loops with this, and then have the buttons here, and then you can put the button through the loops like that. Mm-hmm. And so it would be like perfectly aligned in the middle. Yeah, I want to finish the seams nicely inside as well, so I was wondering what to do. There's like a few options. You can do like flat felled seams, which are basically like these ones, mm-hmm. which are like folded. But with this, it's quite a thick fabric already, so if I fold it on itself, it's going to be a bit bulky, like just for the machine, like not for aesthetic reasons. So another way is to just bind the seams with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my chic sweatshirt mood board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With like different ideas.
Yeah, exactly, because the design is very original and very like not common, but like the material is very down to earth. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
really nice,
Yeah.
but it's a cozy material.
Yeah. The dropped shoulder is a bit like casual, a bit cool, but then you get like the gathered, like a little bit like more elegant.
Yeah.
So I like that balance.
Yeah, and the buttons done this way. But
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Let's do it. To start, I had to unpick the bias binding all the way around the blanket, and actually Isabella helped me do half of it. Then I cut some front panels, and when I was happy with their shape, I cut a matching back panel. I pinned them all together so that I could try it on and make any adjustments I needed. I had decided to finish my inside seams with bias binding, so I ran the 2 layers of blanket with the binding through the machine once. Then I cut the excess seam allowance and folded the binding before sewing again using the stitch in the ditch technique to get a nice looking seam inside and outside. Next, it was time to cut some gigantic sleeves and to gather them by sewing 2 parallel rows of gathering stitches and pulling on the loose threads. I then attached the sleeves to the bodice and then gathered and bound the end of the sleeves, which took so long because that was a lot of fabric, but it looked so good in the end that it was completely worth it. And all the inside seams looked very clean as well, so I was very happy. The next day I made some button loops by folding small sections of the binding twice and sewing them closed. And then I sewed the binding around the raw edges with the loops. I then folded and pinned the binding shut all around to make sure I would be catching all the layers nicely, and I closed it off very carefully with a final stitch in the ditch. It was finally time to add some buttons, and I was really lucky I could use these gorgeous mother of pearl buttons I found in Isabella's grandma's sewing box. And here it is once I was done. Moving on to blanket number 2, I decided to do a similar kind of cardigan but with a different neckline and different sleeves. We were staying with Emma's family for a couple of days, so I got to set up my studio in this gorgeous barn. I started by unpicking the binding, and then I cut 2 front pieces but with a round neckline this time. I then cut a matching back and some sleeves and attached everything together with the binding like last time. The seams looked really neat, so I was really happy. The next day I made some button ties, and then it was time to bind the jacket all the way around. I've already been doing that seam for 23 minutes. Let's see if I manage to finish it before we get to 30 minutes. Posture. I'm sorry, there's no way around it. And it is, okay, 33 minutes. Next, I attached the buttons and then I tried it on. Basically, at this point, I couldn't decide between 2 types of sleeves, so I made both to choose which one I liked best. Are we going for a Renaissance chic? Or for just a simple puff gather wrist? Whichever one I pick, I love it. It was really hard to decide, so I made a poll on Instagram, which was actually not helpful because it was a tie. So the next day I had to choose, and I decided to go with the flared sleeve because it was more unique and fun. And I made it by sewing a channel to the inside of my sleeve and then threading an elastic through a hole to help it gather. I really loved the result, so I'm glad I went with those sleeves. is Monday, 23rd of October, and the craft market is on Saturday, the 28th. So that leaves me a few days to try and make a fourth piece. A blanket I haven't used is this one, which is a super nice, really wide, yellow, 100% cotton blanket. So initially I was thinking I would use it to make another cardigan because now I know what I'm doing, I'm in the flow. But I just came across this cotton midi dress from Ganni, which is just so nice, and I thought it could work so well with this fabric. So I need to figure out the construction. I need to make like the two front pieces, a back piece, and then basically finish it like a cardigan, and then attach all of these to the skirt panel, which is just going to be this long big rectangle that then is going to be gathered. I found this nice yellow binding that goes perfectly well with it, so yeah, let's do it. By now I feel like you must know all the steps I'm gonna do, so you can just relax and enjoy the footage. Since the fabric was thin enough, I decided to stitch the bound seams flat to the bodice, which looks like this from the outside and like this from the inside. And here I am cutting some huge skirt panels. I went for a 2.5 time increase for the gathering, but honestly I think 2 would have been enough because that was a lot of fabric. So Isabella had a few old fabrics she said I could use, and I found this nice yellow linen, which is going to be perfect for the pockets, so that they're not as thick as this material. Next, I finished the armholes with a bias facing, and I actually found a great tutorial for that, so I'll link it in the description because it turned out great. I then made 8 ties so that I could tie 4 bows at the front, and I then attached them to the bodice with the bias. So this time I wanted the bias to be tucked in on the inside and invisible from the outside, and that just meant I had to sew the right angles differently, so I'll link the tutorial I used in the description. Then I folded and pinned the bias inside before top stitching in place. Finally, I gathered and pinned my skirt to the bodice before sewing. I finished that seam with some binding, I hemmed the skirt, and then I was done. The last day before the market, I made some origami paper tags and some fabric labels. Marikuna is my nickname in Georgian, and I decided to rebrand to Marikuna Studio because I thought it would work better for both a brand name and a YouTube channel. And in the evening, we had a little session to help me decide on the final selling prices. So I made a spreadsheet.
Of course you do.
That's why we're friends. So this dress I spent 24 hours on, and the materials were 0. How much do you think I should sell it for?
150 sounds like the minimum. What do you think?
Between 100 and 150.
There is only this one in the whole world.
Okay, then the turquoise cardigan. I spent 23 hours on this.
160.
Yeah, it's even more unique. Like, it's even more unique.
160?
Yeah, same one.
This dress took me 23 hours.
What do you think?
Che c'ha sonno?
What's
That you're sleepy. What you're thinking.
120 for the dresses and 160 for the... On the first day of the market, I was super happy to finally be setting up my clothes with their labels. And as soon as I was done setting up, Isabella came up to me and said she wanted to buy the first dress I had made.
I heard that. Like, no. I can't take it as a gift, so I'm gonna buy it. Well, that's gonna be I'm gonna give the money to him, and then you're gonna give the money to her.
Can you please stop involving me in your schemes?
She just insisted so much, I couldn't say no, and I was just very honored that she liked it that much. While waiting at my stall, I decided to make a laptop pouch with some leftover blanket pieces I had so people could see me work. But I also took some time to wander around the market, and there were so many super nice things and everyone was very friendly. We wanted to buy so much, but for now we just got a wool carpet, a woven basket and some herbal tea. And we also had a lot of roasted chestnuts and some delicious food. Emma and her amazing mom, Rosa Maria, tried on my pieces and they showed them around to everyone. And Isabella's dad also came to say hi and see his transformed bedsheet. People were super nice and encouraging, but I didn't sell anything else on that first day. I got very lucky at the end of the second day though, when Rosa Maria convinced one of her friends to try a cardigan on. She couldn't decide which one to get, so I offered her a discount if she wanted both. So in the end she decided to get one for her niece and one for herself. I was so happy that I also decided to gift her the laptop pouch I had finished by then. So yeah, this is my updated spreadsheet after the market. My earnings are about 325 euros, which is about 5 euros per hour. This isn't much yet, but I know I can streamline my process so I can find the right balance between how much I earn and the value of my work. In any case, I was so happy to take part because this was such a friendly and inspiring event. I'd be curious to know what your favorite piece was, so feel free to let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.